Hi, and welcome to this week's Mortgage Broker Broadcast. This week's episode is the final one in the series about habits with Leigh Rowland. Over the past, what now is 4 weeks, we've talked about obviously the difference between resolutions and habits. We've talked about small wins, about consistency, decision fatigue, and the emotional stuff. And then, so the last one today is really looking at adapting to change, because whatever you do, whether it's in being a broker, business owner, in life, we have to adapt to change pretty much every single day. So this, again, with regards to habits, does make a logical conclusion when we're talking about that, when we're looking at the last episode about habits and the importance of adapting to change, because we'll talk about in the podcast, but when you look at challenges that you will face right now as a broker, as a business owner, as a human being, as a person, when those challenges are thrown at you, then if you just then look at resolutions, then those resolutions will become irrelevant. They will fall by the wayside. You will bin them off because they are just resolutions. Whereas when you're facing challenges and facing the issues that you have, when you've got habits in place, and habits are more flexible and they can be adjustable to like accommodate any new circumstances, new challenges that you're facing. So, and again, with that is moving forward and then you are progressing. So when you've got habits in place, when you're adapting to change, you are still going to continue to progress. And that's the important thing. And that's vital in terms of what we do, is the progressing side of things compared to resolutions, which will be bin them off. So yeah, so that's the point of this podcast. And Leigh's on it again to talk about it with me regarding the adapting to change and wrapping everything around. So yeah, let's just get Leigh onto the podcast. Leigh, welcome back onto the Mortgage Broker Broadcast for the final, well, it's not going to be the final time, but it's the final time in this mini series as we wrap it all together. How are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling good, to be honest with you, Craig. Thanks for inviting me back on. I can't believe this is the fourth one. It's flown by, hasn't it? Absolutely flown by.
It has. And let's just be clear, I have to invite you back on because we said we are going to do 4 series, for a mini series of 4 episodes. So I've got to invite you back on. So there's no sort of, I am joking, obviously, mate. I'm joking.
Well, I think Posey, my daughter, has got a sixth sense about these podcasts, right? Because literally everyone I've been on, she's had me up the night before. I think they sense vulnerability, don't they, children? They know that something's happening. So we were up last night, but anyway, Posey had me up.
Another habit to Posey.
Yeah, Posey's got a habit of waking her dad and parents up the day before he's got to go on a podcast.
And a small win for her based on the fact that she's chuckling right now, knowing that you're recording a podcast.
Yeah, and fair play to Posey. She's got some consistency as well. She knows what she's doing.
Cracking. Well done, mate. Well done. Love it. So let's get into this final episode of this mini-series. And like I said, we've covered so much so far. And obviously, we will review it at the end and bring it all together. So we talked about New Year's resolutions, science behind habits, small wins and consistency that we talked about there, and the decision fatigue as well. We picked up on that, and then the emotional component. So the last bit really is the key to everything really with regards to habits, is about adapting to change, because whether we like it or not, and sometimes it's through choice or sometimes it's not through choice, that we all have to adapt to change. And with regards to habits, that is no different, because you've got to be really adaptable to change with regards to your habits. Is that fair to say, Leigh?
Of course, yeah. I've been thinking about this a little bit because I knew that we touched on it in the last one, if you remember. And I think, especially as you get older as well, you realise that it's fine to change, it's fine to adapt as you go along, but you seem to learn things differently as you go along. So say like 5 years ago, you might have been able to learn by I talk about learning now, really, at the minute, just to give an example. So say you used to be able to learn by repeatedly writing something down and underlining it, right? Now you might learn by seeing a picture or hearing something. And so you shouldn't just stick to the one way of learning or adapting or creating. As you get older, you should, or get older or get more experienced. I suppose they're the same in one way, aren't they? You should be open to all sorts of input into whatever stimulates you, which will help you create those habits. So I was just thinking about myself and how media has changed as well over the last few years, which has enabled me to take on more information quickly, which enables me to learn quicker and put habits in place a little bit quicker as well. Because not just because you've got a podcast, but the podcasts have been amazing for me, absolutely amazing. And videos, especially on social media, the amount of information that we can pick up and absorb quickly and accessibly, we've got to be open to all of that, whatever, I know, at whatever age we are. And I think being aware of what you can learn quickly and what medium you take information on best is really important. And putting that in place in a non-rigid form, so you can take bits from everywhere. I think that would help everybody to be aware of how they take information in to form the habits and get some consistency.
Definitely. No, it's a good point because, like you say, you are learning about yourself in terms of the way that best, like for you, in terms of the different mediums you learn and where you absorb stuff and look at changing. Is the same for me. I know, for example, I read books. I can't listen to them. I cannot listen to an Audible. Like I had a subscription to Audible and I cancelled it because it just didn't work for me. I would rather sit down and read a book or read something through so then I can got time to process it in my own mind rather than skipping back 30 seconds every 2 minutes because I'd not drifted off or because that's the thing is with it, isn't it? That the thing is with things like that is you can drift off with it as well. You've got to be staying in the moment because you're listening to that, you're watching that or reading that, whatever it is, to take on board and change what you're doing and change your habits based on what information and you're learning that you're taking on board. So it's a great point. And that's why with the podcast is you look at the pod, some people listen to the podcast while they're working, some people just listen to podcasts while they're walking out, people watch the podcast or like YouTube or LinkedIn and where we put it out live and things like that. Everybody takes it in different ways, but that's all right. And it like that's okay. It's just it's understanding that.
Exactly. Well, everyone's got different learning styles. We all know that anyway, don't we? But when you talk about adapting yourself, I think to get to the end goal, which is the habit forming, just don't be scared to try different things. And don't be scared if something, like I mentioned last time, if something doesn't work, then as I said before, we're all adults, just change it. Just use it as a positive experience. And you now know that that's not for you.
Yeah.
That's why you've got to look at it. But it comes down to the consistency again. You've got to consistently try, haven't you? Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to know anyway.
Absolutely. I think putting a wrap around that, Leigh, from what you've sort of said there, for me is that when we pull it back to looking at resolutions compared to habits, the thing is that with resolutions, when we look to adapt to change with resolutions, when we face challenges and we hit a bit of friction or whatever you want to call it, we're likely to fall back to the habits we had rather than the resolutions that we're trying to the feast or famine, the boom bust or whatever. We'll go back to so when we get busy, so like you start in January, what I mean by that from a mortgage broker point of view is that you start the year with resolutions. We're going to do this, going to do that. All of a sudden, you get 10 inquiries through. You've got 7 first appointments. You've got cases to get on. The resolutions will just go to the side. They will just go, well, I can't deal with those right now because I've got these things to deal with in front of my face. Whereas with habits, you'll deal with the challenges, but it will be in a habit formation rather than a resolution, which will literally not stick. Do you understand that?
Yeah, of course I do. And I've seen this. What day are we on now? Yeah, a few days already this week. I don't know if people are doing it on purpose to get people to comment, but I have seen quite a few people saying, "Have you still stuck to your New Year's resolutions?" And then giving some words of wisdom on how to do it. I don't know if you've noticed any of them. And so then it does get it. Don't get me wrong. I guess a few people liking it and it gets people chatting. But I'm just thinking, oh, what a load of shit that is, really. I mean, but what? I've probably insulted quite a few people there, so sorry about that. But I just think, not about the resolution itself, but really, is there any point in posting now when we should be talking maybe positively about habit forming and saying how your habits settling in? How are you getting on with your consistency? That type of thing might be a better post than are you sticking to your New Year's resolutions, because they're not really comparable. So I've seen a lot of that on social media, not just on LinkedIn as such, but I've seen it on Facebook with random people as well. So, sort of getting myself out of the hole there if I can.
And it might be a case, like I said, and well done for getting yourself out of that hole there, mate. You did really well.
Thank you.
It could be a case that if people are asking about resolutions and it could be a case of people feeling more comfortable because they've had resolutions that have not they've not worked, they've not stuck to it, and they're part of the 99.99% of the population, which with resolutions which we've talked about before. So they might be just thinking, I want to take comfort in the fact that other people are not achieving their resolutions, which we know, like you can't take comfort in that because, well, you can, but you shouldn't have done the resolutions in the first place. That's my statement.
So this is wrapped around now, haven't it? Because if you remember in episode 1, I was being a bit defensive about resolutions, and now you're being a bit defensive about resolutions. So that's quite interesting. But I know where you're trying to. Yeah, that's interesting. But I take your point. I take your point completely. Yeah.
I think that's it. It is. Yeah, it's a good point, Leigh. And I forgot. Yeah, we did. You was a bit defensive about resolutions. I don't know. I'm not. Is it defensive on resolutions? Have we been defensive on it? I think it's just a case of.
I don't think you're being defensive. I think you're explaining them, and I've jumped all over you on it because I thought it'd be quite funny. But
it's fine. Don't worry about that. But yeah, I think it's just people taking comfort in the fact that theirs has not worked. So they reach out to the rest of the population and go, has yours worked? No, I haven't. Great. Mine haven't worked. Theirs hasn't worked. It's now 24th of January or whatever. Let's just go back to what we were doing before and let's not worry about our resolutions anymore. That's the whole point. It's like, just don't waste your time, effort, and take comfort in the fact that you are like 99.99% of the rest of the population, that by the end of January into February, resolutions have not stuck because of the challenges. Brokers, like I'm hearing positive vibes about the market. Brokers are sort of saying how busy they are. You tell me how busy they are. They say everybody's doing okay. So resolutions will just, this is the whole point. Resolutions will then just go, well, I'm busy now. Drop that. No, he said you've got to get those habits in place, making them stick and changing. And everything we've talked about with it is adapting, like you said, coming to the end of it is about adapting to change. You've got to stick with those habits. We talked about, you asked me the question 7 to 21. We won't be at that 21 point yet because we're not enough into January from a working week point of view to then make those habits stick. We've still got a week left of January. We're on the 24th today. We've still got 7 days left of Jan. We've got to still be making sure we're doing what we said we were going to do about those habits, because like I say, habits are more flexible. You are going to adjust to new circumstances and things like that with habits when you do get busy, but it's just making sure that you are sort of continue to progress with those habits and stacking like you talked about before and all the rest of it.
So the good news is then, if we're just laying it down, is if people are continuing now to make those changes and keep those habits in place, they're on their way, aren't they? They're on their way. So would you suggest having a little look back now to people to have a little look at the achievements, to celebrate what they've done so far, because we're talking about small wins. So if they've got this far, that could be a little look back. Oh, well done, mate. You've done really well there. You've kept this ticking over, and plan a little bit for next time, next week, next month, in order to keep the consistency and reward themselves and get that feeling that we talked about of euphoria, or the feeling of achievement, accomplishment. Would you suggest doing that at this point?
Absolutely, 100% spot on with your comments there and what you've said, because that's important to look at. As I've talked about so many times before, it's important to constantly review
Yeah.
what you've changed, like and where you've come and the habits you've formed over the past 3 weeks, 4 weeks, however long that's been. But it's important to do that at this juncture, because it's the end of January, we're into the last week of the month. You can still influence the habit. Like, you may not have got consistency with your habits right now, but look at those small wins, and by reviewing that and reflecting, looking back on what you've done over the last 3 or 4 weeks, will give you those mentally, that small win thing. I've done that. This is what I've done. This is what I've done. This might not have worked. Well, tweaking and
Adapt.
changing and adapting to do that. But this is sort of the time for reflection to then move forward with it and build and build and build on those solid foundations that you've created over the last 3 or 4 weeks.
I'm just thinking out loud here, right? We haven't got a podcast next week, but I'm thinking that the end of January, start of February might be quite a crucial point for a lot of people. It might be a crucial point, because it's like a cut-off point of the month. So you've either got to look back, celebrate what you've done, write it all down, think of the changes, think of the benefits, and don't just leave it spinning around in your mind, because you might have a mental switch off at the end of January to the start of February. And then you might I'm just thinking of human nature, and maybe even myself, maybe a little bit, thinking, right, we've powered through for January. Oh, that's great. And just give yourself a pat on the back and stop. So I think if people do listen to this, maybe next week, have a good look back at what you've achieved and the habits you formed, the consistency you've done, and the actual development that you've the line of development that you've progressed through, and give yourself a pat on the back. But then really dig deep then for February, because that's when these will be really forming stronger habits. If we had a pound for every time we said habits, we'd be millionaires, wouldn't we? But I'm just thinking out loud that the end of January, start of February might be crucial for a lot of people if they are trying to go along this journey of habit forming. So between us, I think we just need to tell people, you've done brilliant at the minute. And when it comes to the end of January, February, just review what you've done, give yourself a pat on the back, and then power on for February.
Definitely. You're 100% spot on, Leigh, because with it is that you're going to go through that. And we can do a whole other series on adapting to change and the change cycle and the change circle, or whatever you want to call it. But you will go through that, because you have change and you're forming new habits. You will go through that period, like people call it a honeymoon period, or whatever terminology you want to use is fine. There's plenty of different terminologies for exactly the same thing, but you are going to get to that point where, and it is that end of January time, where you're reviewing, you're reflecting and thinking, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what habits have you changed, what habits did you want to change but you haven't managed to change. Well, let's look at, if you've got habits that you have changed and you've enforced, and they are habitual now, it's building on those again, the ones that maybe haven't worked. Well, how can you build the ones that you haven't worked, building those on top of the ones that have worked for you, and stacking those? You're smiling, mate. You've led me up there. You've teed me up. Did you tee me up there?
You're just literally saying what I was thinking. That's why I'm smiling, because I was just going to say something, then you're saying exactly what I was thinking. That's all. That's why I'm smiling at you, because completely agree. It's just exactly what I wanted to say. So that's why I was smiling. That's all it was. Spot on, mate. Absolutely spot on.
Stole your thunder there. Sorry for that. Apologies for that. But at least it's on the podcast anyway. One of us got it out there anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you explained it a lot better than I would have anyhow, mate, to be honest with you. So what do we do now then? How do we wrap this up so we can leave with some positivity for people after we've had 4 episodes?
I think for me is that the main takeaway from this whole mini series for me is that forget resolutions. It's all about habits, and you've got to look at whether you want to understand the science behind habits, and if you do, that's great. If that's the way that your brain works to then understand and look at those in terms of from your understanding point of view that will help you form those habits. That's the big thing for me is that and you don't need to think. The other thing with it as well is that we're doing this at the start of the year. You can change habits whenever you want. Like you don't like that's the thing with New Year's resolutions. Oh, it's a New Year resolution. Whereas habits, once you are everything that we've talked about with regards to consistency, small wins, when you are open to changing habits, you can do it whenever you want. If you've got something that you know in your business as a broker or a business owner that's not working and you want to change a habit that you have, understand it, get the science behind it, all the things we've talked about, and look at 7 to 21 times to then understanding that that's something that you need to form a new habit. And that can be in work, out work, in your business, as a broker, whatever the case may be. There's never a right time or a wrong time to look at changing a habit, whereas resolutions tend to be January the 1st, January the 2nd, first week into January and gone. Whereas now with habits, if you want to change habits in February,
Yeah.
crack on. Does that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. You've got to be open to adapting to change in your business anyway, haven't you? Because things in the last 4 years since I've been here have just moved so fast with all different natural disasters and Brexit and whatever else. You've got to be able to adapt to change and implementing that within your team as well. If you've got a team, they've got to be able to adapt to change as well. And I think if you can talk to them about the science behind it, talking about the consistency, and put that into the culture of the business, then everyone moves. How cheesy is this? Everyone moves forward together, then, don't they?
Absolutely, definitely. Leigh, you asked me if is anything that you want to add before we finish our mini series?
No, not really, Craig. I'd just like to thank you for inviting me on for the last 4 series, and I've been learning as I've been going, and the stuff that you say, with the way you articulate it, makes me think quite openly. And I hope that I've been able to sort of express what I've been thinking right back to you within the podcast. It's quite hard sometimes when you're live, but hopefully it's come across okay. Hopefully someone or somebody can take some benefits and key points from them. And once again, just want to thank you for inviting me on and on such a great podcast. You know, I love the podcast anyway, so thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Leigh, no, honestly, I think you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice there because it has been good to. I think with regards to things like this, it's a good discussion. Do you know what I mean? You and I have good discussions around this, and you've seen it from a different viewpoint to the viewpoint that I've seen it from, and we've had discussions around that. And I think you've learned, I've learned, people who listen to podcasts have learned. So we've all won from like doing this mini series and all learned from this in terms of around habits, which is ultimately what we do every single day. This is the thing we do every single day. So it's good that you've learned and developed. You've been a great guest on the podcast. You really have brought it into line with certain things and made it relevant and pictured it yourself. And when you've talked about certain things like straight line stuff and things like that, it has made so much sense to bring it together. So yeah, Leigh, I really appreciate being part of it. And who knows whether we do another mini series on something else that's very much mindset orientated, but we'll see. But yeah, Leigh, thanks you so much for your time. Yeah, I understand you're very busy, but I appreciate the time and effort that you've taken to be part of the podcast, be part of this mini series, and your input from there. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, mate. My pleasure.
Thanks, Leigh, for being a great guest on this mini series on the last 4 episodes of the Mortgage Broker Broadcast. It's been great to record these episodes. It's been good to have Leigh just there, just to chat things through rather than me doing the solo stuff about habits, just to talk it through and seeing different aspects of it as well, which has thrown up more learning, more development, more progressing for both Leigh and I, and hopefully you. And so, yeah, thank you to everyone who has listened, subscribed to this mini series of the Mortgage Broker Broadcast. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for sharing the wins that you've had, the small wins you've had, and everything else that's come on the back of listening to this podcast. I appreciate that, and we'll probably run another mini series in the future in terms of other things with regards to mindset. But thank you for everyone that's been involved. Thank you for the comments. If there's anything that you want to add, share, please comment, like, on whichever platform you're listening to the podcast or watch the podcast on. Please use that forum. Please use that platform, and we'll get your feedback on there. We'll comment accordingly. Thank you so much. And as always, don't forget to run your own race.